Hello Americans, welcome to our channel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images in video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
Man finds strange baby bird. Vet is stunned when he realizes what it is. This bird was about to turn one man's life completely upside down. The infant creature was discovered in the strangest of places, and when the man who found it brought the baby bird to his local vet, things really got crazy. Because when the vet realized what it was, he was stunned. It was on a Friday when Martin found this little creature. He was free from work and used this time to tend to his garden. The weeds were already plucked, and now he only needed to make a few passes with his lawnmower for a perfect finish. But then Martin suddenly heard something. It was a high-pitched noise that started out softly. But pretty soon, the young, confused-looking Martin heard the sharp noise through the rumbling of his lawnmower engine. "What is that?" Martin spoke out loud as he turned off his machine. He closed his eyes briefly and then started following the strange sound. After a couple of minutes of following the sound through his garden, it led him to a small opening underneath his porch. This deck leading up to his front door was raised about 3 feet off the ground, leaving a long, shallow space free underneath. There was no mistaking it, the sound emanated from there. Martin squatted down and stuck his head into the dark, damp space underneath his porch. There is something there. What is that? Martin saw a small object, and in it was something moving. Curiously, the man crawled deeper into the space until he eventually reached what he sought. What the hell? There was a small nest with a singular bird inside. The creature was clearly just an infant, but it didn't look like any baby bird he had ever seen. It was covered in the most soft and fluffy feathery texture, which was normal for an infant, but it was also massive in size. This wasn't your everyday garden bird. This was something strange, and Martin just knew it. He wanted to know more, but he also did not want to interfere too much. Martin knew that if humans meddled too much, a mother would most likely not return to her nest, so he chose a different approach. Martin placed the complete nest with the baby bird in the center of his garden. He himself took place behind the kitchen window, where he could perfectly see the chirping bird. And there he waited for the baby's mother to return. But after 4 hours of staring, no parent flew in to feed her. It wasn't for a lack of trying by the infant. The little creature chirped her heart out, crying for attention the entire time. Eventually, Martin gave up and took the animal inside. He could tell that it was hungry, so he fed her some of his fishing maggots. And that's when another strange thing happened. The baby bird wasn't hesitant at all. She reached out and grabbed the maggot straight out of Martin's hand. It was like she had known him for years. Was this normal behavior for a wild bird? After some food, the bird tried to stand up, but then Martin saw that she was limping a bit. Did she sprain her ankle? Martin's heart hurt seeing the poor animal struggling to walk, so he took it upon himself to seek help. The worried man called his local vet and asked if he could come over for a quick checkup, but that appointment would go much different than expected. Martin hoped that this doctor could easily help the poor baby bird, and while fixing her leg, the doctor might as well answer some questions. Martin drove over to the vet's office with the animal in a box on his passenger seat. Strangely enough, it sat there completely quiet and relaxed. This was undoubtedly the strangest animal he had ever seen, but it was about to get a whole lot stranger. Once at the vet's clinic, Martin was immediately welcomed in by the doctor himself. He was coming off his break, so his room was already free of previous clients. "Come in," he said calmly. But the calmness of this doctor would change the moment Martin and the bird stepped into his treatment room. Martin placed the box with the bird inside on the vet's table. And that's when the drama started. The vet circled the curious bird multiple times, making notes along the way. Martin could see how the doctor's relaxed demeanor shifted after his inspection continued. It wasn't all that calm anymore. It was quiet for the first few minutes, then the doctor mumbled the following words to himself. "Sprained ankle. Asham. Identifying characteristics?" The doctor made a splint for the bird's leg, but it was clear to Martin that the veterinarian's mind was busy with other thoughts than simply binding a bird's leg. The man did not seem that confident anymore. This new demeanor made Martin nervous, so he questioned the vet about it. But it was like the doctor could not even hear Martin. "This is incredible. I've never seen anything like this," were just some of the words leaving the veterinarian's mouth. After that statement, the confused doctor went to his desk to turn on the computer. Martin was still in the dark, but tried to find clues by watching the doctor's monitor. After about a minute, Martin saw multiple images of a large bird flashing by. The animal looked strange, but oddly familiar when looking at the baby bird in front of him. Was this the animal in its adult stage? The creature looked intimidating, and that made Martin scared a bit. That's when the doctor turned his chair and said, "You're not going to believe this, but this animal should not be able to exist." "I'm completely in shock by this discovery," the doctor then explained that this specific bird was filed as extinct by all world databases over 20 years ago. Martin couldn't believe it, but according to the vet, it had to be true. He inspected all the animal's distinct features and it checked out. Where did you say you found it? Under your porch, Martin nodded, but that wasn't the final question. If Martin had found the baby, where would the mother be? Martin's vet answered many of his questions, but he also added some pieces of concern to the puzzle. If this bird is known as an extinct species, then this baby and her family might be the last of its kind on the entire planet. This was incredible and scary at the same time. They had to find her mother, which was more important than working that day, so the vet gave all of his appointments to the other doctor present and went along with Martin for the ride. Together, they stepped into Martin's car, Martin behind the wheel, the vet beside him, and the bird on his lap. Again, the baby bird remained creepily calm. That was not without reason, but we will find out why a little bit later. In the meantime, the car had reached Martin's driveway again, and the two men stepped out on the hunt for this extremely rare bird. And it so happened that they weren't alone. When they reached the porch where this adventure all started, a woman was already waiting for them. Martin was kind of confused when he saw her, but the vet assured Martin that she was very wanted in this situation. While closing up shop, the vet called in an expert to help. He shook the woman's hand and explained to Martin that she was the perfect person to help them in this situation. Her name was Melissa Brown, and she was one of the leading bird experts in the state. If anyone knew anything about indigenous birds, she would be the one. The two men showed Melissa the baby bird, which was still sitting calmly in Martin's box. The woman was clearly impressed, even a little bit emotional. She said this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience and that she would happily join them in the search. Take us to where you found her. The trio walked over to the edge of the porch where the small 3-foot opening was. This is where I spotted her, all the way in the very back, Martin said while pointing into the dark hole. Melissa crawled in and found the broken eggshells that probably held the baby bird before hatching. She showed the two men the pieces and explained that this type of bird only lays one egg at a time. It was already scarce 20 years ago, and with the low number of eggs hatched every season, their extinction was almost imminent. But somehow, this one survived. It's incredible there was only one problem. In the case of this rare bird, the mother rarely leaves her child. So the fact that this baby bird was here alone was not a good sign. Normally, the father goes hunting for food while the mother continuously says with her young. Martin explained that he waited for 4 hours without seeing the mother. That's not good. The mother of this kind would normally always return for her child. So the fact that this didn't happen meant that something was keeping her away, but what she explained once more that this bird family needed protection since it was probably the last of its kind. Together, they frantically searched the area around the porch. And that's when Martin saw it. He had mowed his grass, and the lawn was filled with a blanket of fine grass. But underneath the grassy texture, he suddenly spotted a claw print and then another. They were leading away from the garden. Martin was overjoyed and a little nervous because these claw prints looked huge. It was one thing seeing the bird on a computer screen, but seeing live evidence of its sheer size was something else entirely. They had to go now. Martin wanted to place the baby bird safely inside, but the vet told him not to. He said they might need the baby bird's call to lure her mother. Martin agreed and held the box close to his chest as they followed the track away from his garden. The trail led them into the forest where the baby bird's chirps echoed through the trees. Tension was palpable, and Martin's nerves and fears grew with every chirp uttered by the tiny creature. After about half an hour of walking and trying to spot the trail, something suddenly happened. The baby bird let out a loud chirp, and this time it received a response. But this sound was much deeper. It came from somewhere way up high in the trees. It was close, but none of the people searching could detect anything. It sounded intimidating, though, and the only suggestion the expert could make was for them to be quiet and listen. Remain silent and listen to where the sound comes from. Without saying another word, the three people shuffled through an open piece of the forest, trying to avoid twigs on the ground. And after a few more minutes of sneaking around, an actual sighting appeared. A massive shadow was seen floating through the tall forest trees. Martin nodded his head. He did so to indicate that he had spotted the large bird, but the expert was already one step ahead. She reached out her hand, gesturing that Martin should give her the box with the bird inside. Martin obliged as Melissa placed the baby bird in the center of the forest floor. Now they waited. The baby clearly recognized her mother because her chirping increased in volume. Her call of attention worked because the large shadow that flew overhead quickly shot down and landed on the forest floor beside her. The bird was huge, the largest one Martin had ever seen, and that included zoo visits. Would she still acknowledge her young after being handled by humans for this extensive period of time? The mother bird edged closer and answered that question rather quickly by bumping her head softly against the baby bird. It was a success, and the team was happy, but a few more questions remained. Why would a mother bird leave her young like that? And why did the baby bird trust people so easily? This was all highly irregular. The vet and Martin stayed safe so as not to disturb the mother and her child. But then they suddenly saw the expert inch closer. "What are you doing?" Melissa shushed them and asked for trust as she moved closer to the two birds. Martin and the vet didn't understand what was going on. If this really was the extinct bird they found, then carefully protecting them was their priority, not scaring them away. But apparently, the expert spotted something differently. Her demeanor seemed to have shifted. It was like she had found a new form of confidence, the kind that only came with finding out new information. But what was it? Martin and the vet watched closely as Melissa calmly walked up to the two birds, eventually standing right beside them. For some reason, the mother and her child remained completely calm. It was the strangest sight and about to get even stranger. Melissa smiled and asked the two men to come out of hiding and join her. "I have some news for you. It's positive and negative. Which one do you want first?" Martin looked at the woman, confused, and told her to give the bad news first. "Well, this bird is not the extinct species we thought to find today, so unfortunately we have failed in that mission. But that doesn't mean that these creatures aren't special." Martin saw how the lady stroked the bird's feathers. The expert explained that this was a very special type of bird called the harpy eagle. It was one of the largest eagle species and was still rare, especially this one. Melissa showed them the coloring on the feathers and said there were only about 1,000 left on Earth. "But how were you able to touch them?" Melissa smiled and said that the harpy eagle is one of the most intelligent birds on the planet. She stated that they were known to be trusting and friendly toward humans. She also admitted that their appearance did resemble that of the extinct animal quite closely. "I was fooled as well. There was one odd thing, though. The harpy eagle was not native to this world, so seeing it here was pretty strange. They are probably the first of their kind to settle in this neck of the woods. I think it has to do with global warming affecting their migration." The expert went on to explain the child's abandonment. She believed that due to the baby bird's injury and the trust these animals had in humans, the eagle figured that a human could help her child better than she could. "The bird probably placed her in your care, hoping you could help. These birds were beautiful, emphatic, and mostly highly intelligent, and somehow the mother bird's plan worked to perfection. Her child was bandaged up and feeling a lot better than before." Martin also found a whole new appreciation for nature in this bird species. A moment later, the father flew in. The trio stepped back and watched the loving scene unfold before them in amazement. Both parents nudged the baby bird before lifting it off the ground and bringing it to a nearby tree. Martin felt a warm feeling well up inside of him. "This was an amazing journey, thank you."